What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
Whoa, and aloha, America. Hang on a second. I got a bad master gain on my mixer here. Boy, this equipment is just all falling apart here. All right, anyway, it is Wednesday, March 1st, 2017 here, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open. 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And obviously, last night, Donald Trump's speech before Congress was just absolutely brilliant. He's got an incredible speechwriter. Let's give credit where credit is due. And Trump went on out there. He's obviously been refining his presentation. He's dropped that sort of almost Carney-esque persona he had during the campaign, and he came across as presidential, and everybody's just impressed. He may have been inaugurated last January, but last night made it clear he is the president of these United States, and you might as well get used to it right now. And it just got tremendous ovation here. Trump's speech was universally praised. And it's the best speech he's ever given. It hit all the points that he was making during the campaign, reinforcing it. Took a hard line on immigration, and he linked it to the unemployment problems of the American people, which is certainly valid, certainly true. Van Jones is out there saying that was one of the most extraordinary moments in American politics you have ever seen. I absolutely agree, and I'll tell you why. Political speeches, I tend to watch the first part of it to get the tone, and then usually I get bored and I go someplace else. I watched this one all the way through to the very end, including the Democratic reply, and I got some comments about that. Even CNN's snap poll among what we presume to be heavily liberal Democrats came out 78% loved the speech. And it undermines CNN's fake narrative about how nobody likes him and the Republicans are turning against him and he's horrible this and horrible that. Story coming out of the Daily Mail. Last night, the real Donald Trump finally stood up. If he can show the world the same compassion he showed Ryan Owens' grieving widow and live by the same code as the SEALs, he can truly make America great again. Huge surge in optimism coming on out from that speech. It was a defining moment. And, of course, immediately liberal celebrities came on out trying to criticize the president, saying, oh, he's just using her as a prop, and it's just laying on the schmaltz and everything. Bill Maher and Michael Moore were out there just criticizing Donald Trump for acknowledging this military widow in the campaign. Now, over on Twitter, Dan Grio, who revealed he was a volunteer for Hillary Clinton's failed campaign, said, sorry, Owen's wife you're not helping yourself or your husband's memory, standing there and clapping like an idiot. Trump just used you. The backflash was so serious he deleted his entire Twitter account. Joe Concha was on Twitter. Seriously, if only 18% of the country was optimistic about the future last July, and 40% are optimistic now, according to the latest Wall Street Journal NBC poll, then obviously things are looking up. And having optimism doesn't necessarily mean things are going to get better, but having optimism means you're more ready to work and commit to making things better. Another article came on out here from Investment Watch blog. Last night marked the end of the Democratic Party. I have to feel sorry for the Democrats. Somebody played a really, really dirty trick on all of them by painting super glue all over their chairs in the House of Representatives because they were just unable to stand up when everybody else was standing up to applaud President Trump here. No, basically they were expressing their ire that wasn't Hillary up there making that speech. And by the way, during this speech, they had several close-ups of Nancy Pelosi's face, and she just wasn't even trying to hide her disgust and disdain. She was just getting into this stink-face thing, looking like an old librarian with too much noise around her. And the Democrats came across as basically still trying to divide the nation, while Donald Trump is uniting it. They're being accused of being un-American. Now, there is one point. Let's give credit where credit is due. As the speech wore on, and especially when Trump got into talking about our military veterans and our SEALs and those who take the oath, put on the uniform, and follow their orders, even if we question the legitimacy of the orders. Some of the Democrats began to stand up and applaud. And toward the end of the speech, it looked like Donald Trump was actually starting to win over more and more of those Democrats on that side of the House. And then, of course, as soon as the speech was over, the Democrats just all got up and left. It had obviously been planned ahead of time. As soon as the speech is over, we're all leaving. We don't want to be, which was kind of weird because Trump, when he stepped down from the podium, the first thing he did is he went to the Democratic side of the House to try and extend some olive branches, shake some hands. And some of the Democrats stayed and talked to the president. The rest skedaddled, and then Trump went on over and talked to the Republican side of the House here. But everybody was trying to do all this symbolism. Now, apparently last night, and because I'm not big into fashion, I almost didn't notice it, the Democratic women were all wearing white to Donald Trump's address. And everybody was saying, what is this all about? And supposedly this was to show Democratic women's solidarity with women's suffrage, proving that the Democratic Party is still rooted in the 1800s and unaware that the vast majority of the American people don't know that the women's suffrage movement wore white. In fact, most people were saying it reminded them of the fact that the Democrats started the Ku Klux Klan. Now, I stayed to listen to the Democratic response to Trump's speech. And first of all, Trump did not give the Democrats any opportunity to get their shills they had in the audience to scream and shout at him. Trump owned that room last night. So we went to the Democratic response, and this guy's talking about this pre-written response to Donald Trump's speech, and he's totally off target. He is responding to things Trump didn't even say, and it was so out of skew with what came down. I'm starting to wonder if maybe Donald Trump played the Democrats, and he used one of his identified leakers inside the White House and fed them a totally bogus draft of the speech. So they wrote their response based on this complete fiction. It certainly sounds like that. They were out there talking about issues Trump had not brought up. They didn't respond to any of the things that he said. It was almost embarrassing. All right, we're going to grab a couple of phone calls here. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Doing fine.
I liked that joke yesterday about being a lesbian trapped in a man's body.
Yes.
I think I have the same.
Yeah.
You know, Mike, quickly with Mateus, our good friend Mateus in Canada.
Yes.
I think what he was talking about, and I've read about this, was organ transplants taken from members of Falun Gong, for example. Just basically innocent people taken by the Chinese authorities, and who knows if it's true or not, taken by the Chinese authorities, and their organs are...
Well, in this specific, in the context of the story that we were talking about, it was condemned criminals, and that was the context. We know there's a lot of organ harvesting going on that is absolutely shameful, and it's not just China. A lot of that is going on over in Israel, and you know, there's a huge
Albania, Kosovo,
huge global black market in stolen organs, and it really is, you know, fairly disgusting. But in the context of a condemned criminal, you know, I don't really have a problem with that. And like I said, if in another alternative lifetime I wound up on death row, I would absolutely not have a problem with that. In fact, I would rather they cut me up and use the spare parts for other people than just throw it all in a hole in the ground. So I really don't have a problem with that. Remember that old Harry Chapin song? Please don't bury me down in that dark, cold, cold ground. I'd rather that you'd cut me up and pass me all around. Throw my brain in a hurricane, and the blind can have my eyes, and the deaf can have both my ears if they don't mind the size, and it goes on from there. And, yeah.
Pretty good.
So, anyway, what else?
Also in Kosovo, too, that mafia, that artificially created mafia state. Mike, on the immigration issue you were talking about yesterday with a few of the callers, and I agree with those callers who called these guys terrorists, those who keep getting deported and they keep coming back, and those who are killing or raping, they are terrorists, and they should get a bullet in the head. I completely agree with them. You know, Mike, Arizona's been really cracking down on the illegals, especially on employers. And I don't know if you heard about this. There were a group of Mexican legislators from a nearby state, I guess the state that borders Arizona, condemning the Arizona state government for what they're doing against these illegal Mexicans. And these Mexicans, I mean, they're crapping on the U.S., just like Castro did with the Mariel boat lift. They're happy to see the dregs of their jails, and even those people who are poor, because it's an escape valve. It's a perfect arrangement for these Mexican legislators. They're corrupt.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, Cuba. When the U.S. allowed Cuban immigration, Castro went right down to the prisons, and he absolutely emptied them out, put them all on boats, and said, 90 miles that way. Get out of here. Right.
I mean, these people are so corrupt. They have the perfect deal. They get rich from their corruption, and then their economy is poor, and their people just, the escape valve is, just go north, go to the U.S. That's all. That's how they solve their problem. Yes. That's why Trump has to continue. He can't compromise on this. I heard him say compromise a lot last night with respect to the immigration. He can't compromise. And the first thing that has to be done, that border has to be secured, because too many times past Republican presidents, Reagan in particular, made these deals with Democrats, and that was part of the deal, and it was never followed through. The border was never secured. So that has to be the number one objective for Trump, is securing that border first, because these crooked Mexican politicians are crapping on this country.
Well, again, the reason Trump used the word compromise in his speech is he's trying to send a message saying that he's willing to alter his position on immigration to an extent that the other side is willing to adjust their expectations and their demands. So that was a political message. But the wall, it's a symbol more than anything else. We already know that there have been tunnels under the walls, and literally at one point somebody did a hot air balloon over the wall and everything. The real key to shutting down this illegal immigration problem is to enforce the existing Title VIII laws in this country that say you may not harbor, you may not transport, you may not employ an illegal immigrant, or you are going to go to jail. You start throwing some of these people who are out there advocating for illegal immigrants into prison because they are aiding and abetting a crime, and I think you're going to see the problems start to go away. And if you cut off that economic incentive for these people to come into our country illegally, they're going to stop doing it. The only reason they're risking crossing that border with all the crime that's going on down there is because they're expecting free handouts and food stamps and welfare, and maybe they'll get a higher paying job than what they had in their home countries. But you cut that off, and there's no reason for them to come here, except for the ones who are fleeing prosecution, and that's just trading one jail for another.
Right. I mean, but I don't buy that argument. Oh, you can't secure the border because then they're going to come in via sea, or they're going to, build tunnels. Yeah, maybe a few will come in via tunnels, but still, I mean, the number that are coming through the border now, I mean, it's ridiculous. So I think you have to secure the border, not only with the wall, but also with technology that you discussed yesterday, and obviously take away all this free stuff, take away that magnet of food stamps and the like. That as well is a key.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's not like Trump has to pass any new laws. He just has to enforce the ones that are already out there. And the first thing you got to do is start smacking down on all of these governors and mayors who are still declaring their cities to be sanctuary cities and refusing to help federal immigration authorities, because they're all guilty of violations of Title VIII. They could all be arrested and sent to prison for each count of the violation. So you take the number of illegals who are being harbored within a city, multiply that by 5 years apiece, and you can understand there's some serious jail time out there.
Yeah. And those Democrats, I mean, I'm not a fan of these Republicans either, but those Democrats, there was one instant during the speech where Trump was talking about bringing jobs back to America. Nancy Pelosi, just no reaction at all. I think she was busy on her cell phone. I guess American jobs, bringing back jobs to America is not a priority for her.
Well, you must have looked at Pelosi at a different place than I did, because the two times I saw a close-up of her, she was just making stink face like crazy. I mean, her face was all like a prune. She was just so unhappy.
And then, of course, that groan when Trump talked about setting up that group, those who are that victim group of victims of illegal immigrants. Oh, the groan, the shock, that these people expressed. Just a disgrace.
I mean, that's obvious because, a big part of the pro-immigration thing is they're trying to hide the fact that it is leading to a massive increase in crime and assault and attack. And it's just like the government of Sweden is trying to keep a lid on all of that over there. The liberal Democrats in this country are trying to say these illegal immigrants aren't for any kind of a problem, and yet we've got MS-13 is coming in with them. They're bringing in drugs to sell for a financial boost to get started with, and it's ridiculous. And I think that was one of the smartest things Trump did, because now, instead of the liberal media being able to sort of like ignore this, you have, Trump is going to have this team out there who's going to be publicizing all of this.
Yeah. Oh, last thing, Mike, to those who are pushing for war with Russia, I would encourage them to read an excellent book called The Eastern Front by Leon de Grelle. He was a volunteer of the Waffen-SS from Belgium, and I'm just halfway through the book, and it's just, it's just scary, the things that he and his company went through on the Russian steppe. So people should read that book, The Eastern Front by Leon de Grelle, and see how easy this future war with Russia would be.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Switch to Carrie in Wisconsin. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Doing all right, considering we're under rain and thunder showers here.
We got snow here. That's that global warming again.
Yeah, we got a blizzard down on the top of the Big Island. I was listening to the
really?
weather radio earlier, and there's a blizzard warning. Do not go up to the top of that mountain. You may not get back down.
Okay, the reason I'm calling today is because you said it was Harry Chapin, and it's actually John Prine that did that song.
Right. You are right. I misspoke. And but
as a matter of fact, for my brother's last birthday, I bought him a John Prine CD.
Mm-hmm. And there was another Johnny Prine song, the flag decal song. I love that one. Yep.
Won't get you into heaven no more.
Yes. And your flag decal won't get you into heaven anymore. All right, well, we're not going to turn this into a music show, or Claire's going to get very upset that we're not playing her stuff.
Nope. Just called to make sure you're corrected, and have a good one. Nice talking to you, and call you again sometime.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Here we're going to switch to William in Southern California. We may have to take you to the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Just wanted to point out when you were speaking about the, Democrat congresswomen all wearing white, for pro-suffrage, women's movement. One of the things that I saw that was interesting, Nancy Pelosi had a Twitter post where she tweeted a photo of all the women. I don't know if you've seen that. The only one that wasn't wearing white was Tulsi Gabbard.
Good for Tulsi. I am really beginning to like her.
It was great to see her not. I mean, she still stood on the photo, right? Because obviously she probably had to, but she didn't fall down into that whole hokey. Let's protest, let's do this. You just, stood in her own person. That's what I gathered from that photo. So, props for her.
All right, absolutely. Okay, listen, we're going to let you go here. We're coming up on a commercial break, and during the commercial break, I'm going to jiggle some wires here and try and clean up our sound because apparently it's going out into the ether as less than wonderful. So when we come on back, we'll be taking more phone calls. The phone lines are really loaded up here, and so we're going to take a few more phone calls, then we're going to shut off the phone lines, get back to the news because I got a lot of stuff to report. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we are going to go back to the phones. We're going to take 4 more phone calls, and then we're going to close the lines because I got a lot of news to get through today. Mark in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Yes, Michael, considering the speech last night, I understand that supposedly we've had several cemeteries across the country attacked by the particular group. The Jewish people have said that, and they're reporting more and more threats and more threats. Well, here's the thing. We're having these Confederate symbols being taken down. You know, by the way, we have the right to dissent, and that's what makes us a free nation, is the right to differ and the right to debate and the right to free speech. So the Confederate symbols are being taken down, symbols of dissent. But here's something more important. We haven't heard anything about this in the mainstream media. Now, because that would be controversial for a lot of people, the Confederate stuff. Okay, I understand that. But what about Thomas Jefferson? The statue of Thomas Jefferson at the College of William and Mary has been defaced. No mention of that in the mainstream media. And this is one of our founding fathers of this nation.
Yes.
I find that very interesting. How come no mention? So, and who's behind keeping that out of the media? Who owns the media?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and who's here's another symbol. I don't know if you've been to San Antonio as of late in the last few years, but you know, the United Nations declared the Alamo a United Nations heritage site. That would be 4,400 acres, which is approximately 7 square miles. They've dedicated that as a United Nations heritage site, which gives them jurisdiction, and through treaty, I think they might have something to say about that. I say we take it back. If you'll go there, you'll notice that it's been taken over by Mexicans. Half the people who live in San Antonio are Mexican, and they do not speak English, and they do not seek to speak English.
Okay, now,
so
Mark, you're kind of overlapping a bunch of different issues. So let me back up here and start with the first part of it. First of all, we know that a huge percentage of these so-called hate crimes against Jews turn out to be hoaxes. And as I've commented earlier on the show, when you start seeing a flood of bomb threat phone calls to Jewish centers and tombstones being knocked over in cemeteries, it's Israel trying to reassert its status as world's perpetual victim class ahead of doing something really, really nasty. And so right now I'm waiting for Israel to just haul off and do something really, really nasty. And then they'll say, well, look, we've suffered so much through history. We're suffering now. We're fighting against the anti-Semites. So that's one issue, and it's distinct. As far as the takedown of the Confederate symbols or any of our old heritage symbols, the Gadsden flag is now being banned all over the country. And the defacing of Thomas Jefferson, that is part of this push for globalism to erase the cultural, historical, and regional identities of people around the world to make it easier to blend them together and make it easier to control them. Because people with a strong sense of identity, who they are, where they come from, what they stand for, what they believe, people like that are very, very difficult to influence and control. And so that is what I think is behind this attack on the Confederacy and the attack on Thomas Jefferson. They're trying to blur and erase our history so we don't have a strong sense of who we are as an American people. And hopefully we're going to start seeing a pushback on that. As far as the immigration issue, yes, absolutely. We're seeing large sections of our country, San Antonio, Texas, Southern California. The demographics are now more Hispanic than they are indigenous Americans. And I do think it's a problem because these areas are not benefiting from this change in the demographics. They're basically in major decline, economic decline, infrastructure decline. And as the caller onto the show yesterday was saying, it's even dragging down the educational system to constantly try and deal with the illegals at the expense of the indigenous American students who are getting bored because they're not being challenged.
Yes. Well, thank you, Michael. I just wanted to share that, especially about Thomas Jefferson. I mean, that's uncontroversial. He's uncontroversial. Now they're trying to take him down, and now they're claiming that of course he did own slaves, and they're hitting him on that, and they want to demolish all of our references for our history.
Back then it was legal. And, we don't really have a justification for judging people who lived in the past based on the laws and rules we live under today. That's where it gets absurd. Got to let you go, Mark. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones here. Steve in Massachusetts. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I want to talk about debt ceiling.
Yes.
And I know you mentioned it briefly yesterday, but
do we still have one?
Yeah, apparently. But what David Stackman was saying is they're thinking about freezing it on March 15th. And when when Trump goes to ask for a raise of the debt ceiling, he's thinking that Congress is not going to go along with him, as they did with the other presidents, because he's Trump and he's not well liked in Congress. So he thinks that if they don't raise the debt ceiling, that they only have $200 billion in reserve for them to go through, and they're going to go through that money in a couple of months. And he sees a dire situation where they might shut down the government for a while, some of the programs. He's not going to be able to fund the military like he wants to, or...
well, you know, Congress ought to take a deep breath here and realize that this childishness needs to stop, and they need to work with Donald Trump, because if they blockade him and they create an economic crisis, that will allow Donald Trump to activate those accumulated FEMA executive orders going all the way back to Richard Nixon, where Trump will be able to take over control of the economy and Congress will get to go home. Now, if they want to make Donald Trump into a dictator, they're going about it exactly the right way, because past presidents have already created the legal authority for Donald Trump to do that. I hope he's not going to do that. I think it would be a disaster. But this is where Congress is pushing him into a corner, Trump is not going to hesitate to take advantage of any legal options he's got, and these include all of those accumulated FEMA executive orders that have basically said when the president declares a national emergency, Congress gets to go on permanent vacation.
Yeah, and that's pretty much how he described it. He says that it could be pretty much a fiscal bloodbath. It could really turn out to be something really dire. And I think it's a date, March 15th, that we should really look out for and see what happens.
Beware the Ides of March.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for everything that you've been doing, and we definitely appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you very much for the kind words. We're going to switch over to Jonathan in Texas. Aloha, Jonathan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thank you very much for taking my phone call. I wanted to talk about that increase in Pentagon spending, that $54 billion that Trump said he was going to increase by cutting. I don't even know what he's going to cut, but what do you think he's going to cut? Increase that.
Well, he's talking about cutting the EPA, cutting the Endowment for the Arts, cutting a lot of fluffy liberal stuff here. Now, that being said, that's one part of Trump's speech I did not agree with. I agreed with, I would say, probably 85-90% of what he said. I didn't agree with him about Israel. I didn't agree with him about Iran, and I didn't agree with him about the increased military spending. I think Trump would be much wiser to basically apply his business acumen to the military-industrial complex and start saying, you guys are just wasting way too much money. Let's clean up the waste. Let's be cost-effective first, and then we'll talk about added funding to keep the military going. That is one area.
But me, you, and everybody on this radio knows that nothing in government happens on accident, right?
Yes.
So here's another question. How does the opium or heroin from Afghanistan get into the inner city of Chicago and all the other inner cities in the U.S.? How does that happen? The
same way the cocaine was coming up from Nicaragua into Little Rock, Arkansas. Well, actually, Mena, Arkansas. And if you go to the top of my webpage, there in that little gray box where there's some permanently linked stories, there's one called Opium and Afghanistan. And it's the story about how the Taliban had eradicated opium poppies from Afghanistan, and as soon as the U.S. invaded and took over, the poppies were blooming, the bumper crops were coming on in, and cheap heroin was flowing into the United States. And we have photos of coalition forces in their uniforms basically handling the sacks of raw opium.
Yeah, that's why exactly. You're right on one thing, on that everybody needs to know their history, because this is really the main thing. This is how you destroy a society. That's why they're trying to push all this other stuff like welfare and immigration and EPA, and saying that when really, jobs, technological innovation is going to make us all obsolete anyways. And the way the elites look at it is, because when you really look at it, if people just have enough for what they need, then why, if they have enough food and living shelter, they're not going to go risk their life, try to get more money so they could buy a nice car or a nice thing, because they already have what they need. And then our Valley News, because we have a big problem with the cartels, they're here recruiting American kids from the high schools, just the same way the kids were being recruited in the inner cities, like in Harlem, Chicago, and Detroit.
Yeah.
Like you said, during that time, they're recruiting them with lots of money, and power. And if you cut the social programs in these very poor places, what do you think is going to happen? Who do you think the people are going to trust? Because that's what Mexico has. Mexico's problem is they don't help any of their cities, towns, nothing. They don't. The tax money goes. It's the haves and have-nots. The tax money goes straight to the government. Doesn't get distributed nowhere. That's why the cartels have so much power, because they build the infrastructure. And I'm not on the side or anything, but if you want to get this fixed, just like I think what that general who was talking about the 7 nations that they wanted to invade, I guess, the only thing since the only thing you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail.
Well, let me back up on something that you said here, because you're absolutely right. Many, many years ago, I had an acquaintance who had actually been involved in the illegal drug trade and was connected with the CIA. And they were sharing stories with me about some of these villages down in Mexico and Central America that are run by the drug cartels. And the drug cartels do spend their drug money to improve life there. They set up schools, they improve the roads, and the people who are living in these villages are very happy to be in those villages because they have a higher standard of living than that being provided by the government. And, of course, this helps the drug cartels because the police forces aren't going to get any cooperation from anybody around there. They're almost functioning as their own little privateer governments down there. And so that really is a factor. But in terms of those poor neighborhoods, one of the reasons they are poor is because that illegal drug trade is sucking so much of the available capital out of there before it can be used for infrastructure repair, business development, and so forth. So I think shutting down that illegal drug trade is necessary to start improving the life in those inner city neighborhoods by letting them keep their money and start putting it in a more positive direction.
Exactly. It almost makes you wonder if the CIA is not just involved in the gun running scheme, but actually, just like with ISIS, they're actually supplying people. Because like you said, with the gangs here, those are the soldiers over there. And when you really look at it,
Mark, the CIA has been involved in drug running for decades. There was a book and a video. Hang on, let me finish. There was a book and a video by a gentleman named Bo Greitz, A Nation Betrayed, where he was talking about how the CIA was running heroin out of Vietnam and bringing it back to the United States for sale. And, of course, we know that Operation Screwworm in Arkansas in the mid-1980s was manufacturing untraceable military weapons, smuggling them down to Nicaragua, and they were funding it all with tons and tons of cocaine smuggled back into the United States of America and sold to our kids. Sometimes people joke that CIA means the Cocaine Importation Agency. They've been neck deep in this all along. That's no secret. That's no revelation.
Because the drug war, though, it's on the competitive drugs, and that's what I was saying. You have the Sinaloa was the biggest cartel down there, and then if you look at the Zetas, they came out of the military wing of the Sinaloa. Well, who could convince these people and pay them more to make them leave a perfectly good, comfy situation that they were at? And then when you look at the interrogations and when you get down to the nitty-gritty and you actually look at the, translate the interrogations and look at the power struggle, the Zetas were wanting to take over power, but it almost makes you think who. Yeah,
and of course our government starts sending military weapons down to that Sinaloa cartel under Operation Fast and Furious, and those guns are used to reestablish the Sinaloa's monopoly because competition drives down prices and nobody likes that. Anyway, Mark, got to let you go. I've given you a lot of time on the air. We need, Steve, we need to let you go and switch over to, I lost track on.
That was Jonathan.
It's Jonathan. Okay, Jonathan, we're going to let you go, and we're going to talk to Rita in Illinois. Rita, thank you for waiting so patiently all this time. What is on your mind? We lost Rita. All right, we're going to close the lines for a little while, and we're going to try and get some news done here. Now, getting on back to the aftermath of Donald Trump's amazing speech last night, we're already hearing all this grumbling about people who were just not happy that Donald Trump did so well. And Mitch McConnell is out there saying that Donald Trump's proposed budget cuts for the State Department probably will not pass the Senate. And I'm not sure where Mitch McConnell is coming from, because all revenue measures originate in the House of Representatives, and the Senate either ratifies or refuses to ratify, and maybe that's what he's talking about. But if Congress starts saying we want to keep on the reckless spending into areas that don't need it, and where it's wasteful, at the same time Trump is saying we need to get more money back to the American people, we're heading toward an obvious conflict. The fact of the matter is, there is a huge amount of waste and bloat in the federal government. If you talk to anybody who comes from the world of business, and that's going to include Donald Trump or any of the CEOs of those very successful Japanese corporations, they're going to tell you that management should never exceed more than 10% of the total workforce of whatever enterprise you're doing. And in the United States, government is everywhere. Government is huge. We have more people working in government than working in manufacturing. That's like trying to run a business where you have 10 managers and only 2 people actually making the product. Do you think that's going to be a successful business? Of course not. There are lots of areas where things need to get trimmed out. At the very least, start firing all those government workers who are sitting there looking at porn all day long on their taxpayer-funded computers. Now, apparently, Eric Holder is sending signals that we can expect to see Barack Obama to reemerge on the public stage, leading what is being called the anti-Trump army. He's ready to roll. We're going to take the nation back for the liberals. Even though we lost the election, to heck with democracy, we want the country back here. And Chuck Schumer, and by the way, he was another interesting face in the close-ups in last night's speech. You could just see that he was steaming at this whole thing. Anyway, Chuck Schumer went on ABC's The View, and I don't know why anybody still watches that, because of just how hardcore liberal ridiculous they become. But apparently, Chuck Schumer was in there selling this idea that even the Republicans in Congress hate Donald Trump. That's been a big talking point of the anti-Trump forces. Even the Republicans don't like him. And, of course, looking at the response to the speech last night, certainly doesn't look like the Republicans are having much of a problem with Donald Trump right now. But you need to remember, on Rachel Maddow's show, Schumer actually implied the intelligence community was going to get back at Trump for criticizing them. And maybe there's a little back-channel fighting going on. But all of these predictions and warnings that Trump was going to be assassinated haven't really happened. And I think this idea that the GOP are very unhappy with Donald Trump is very questionable. Certainly they're very happy that Donald Trump has revitalized the Republican Party, that he's in the White House, that things are looking very good for the Republicans to hang on to power in the 2018 and 2020 elections. And the more and more the Democrats behave like children, the more they're destroying their own brand. And they may blame Donald Trump, and they may blame the media, and they may blame independent media, and they may blame the man in the moon, but they're self-destructing on national television. Now, getting on the national television, Sean Spicer, boy, is he earning every nickel of the money they pay him. Was in another one of these White House press conferences, and an ABC reporter got up and challenged him on this story that appeared in the New York Slimes, that the Trump White House pressured the CIA to suppress that there was a link between the Trump administration and Russia, and that Russia had interfered with the election and all the rest of it. And Spicer turns around and says that New York Times story is total BS. And he's absolutely right. And the critical problem that the corporate media is now having to deal with is they come on out with their lies, and they cite each other as an authoritative source to back up the lies, except that nobody in America is listening to them anymore. Nobody sees them as trustworthy or accurate. You can have 5 people in a row insisting that the sky is red, and everybody knows all 5 of them are lying. Just like all these scientists about human-caused global warming and vaccines are safe and GMOs are good for you. Now then, the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes has categorically confirmed there is absolutely no evidence that Russia hacked the U.S. election and has no relationship with the Trump administration over and above the obvious diplomatic connections between 2 heads of state. And the corporate media is still out there pushing Russia stole the election, Russia stole the election, Russia stole the election. All of the election fraud that has been found points to the Hillary Clinton campaign. And we saw it on full display even during the primaries when they cheated Bernie Sanders out of it. He kept winning all the votes and she somehow kept getting all the delegates. Over at PolitiFact, they're trying to criticize the president on his comments about how the national debt is in fact actually in decline. And PolitiFact actually admitted the numbers check out and still declared Trump's remark mostly false. Hey, it's mostly false. Yeah, and they do that in the headline in the hope that people won't read on further down where PolitiFact has to admit the numbers actually do check out. Total public debt has dropped $22 billion since the Gateway Pundit article published, according to the U.S. Department of Treasury. They're actually admitting Trump was telling the truth, but the headline still is, oh, it's mostly false. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And there's an interesting article over at WashingtonsBlog.com where newly declassified documents have revealed yet again a senior CIA agent and deputy director of the Directorate of Intelligence worked closely with owners and journalists at many of the largest media outlets. And admit it, you're not surprised. We've been talking about Operation Mockingbird many, many times. The corporate media is used for propaganda by their corporate owners, by the U.S. government, certainly by Israel, by anybody else who's got the money and the juice to go on in there and feed stories that you are supposed to believe are true. Vaccines are safe. GMO is good for you. Humans are warming the earth. Now, here's a very telling indicator. Americans right now today have fewer TVs on average than they did back in 2009. And that's true in our household. When the bedroom TV died, we just decided we weren't going to bother replacing it because there wasn't anything worthwhile watching on TV anyway at night. And the number of households that have no TVs at all are growing. Now, yes, part of that is explained by streaming to computers. But to be very honest, using up a computer just to watch TV, that strikes me as a little bit costly. Because when you wear out the computer, that's a more expensive thing to replace than just a dedicated TV set. Now, CNN is out there, and like the rest of the corporate media, they're out there trying to find some way to salvage their reputation, to reassure their viewers that they're the real news and the rest of us are all phonies and arms of Russian propaganda. CNN is claiming that they do not, in fact, have any bias towards liberal Democrats, and anybody who watched them during the Hillary Clinton campaign is going to start laughing at that one. But they're now accusing the conservative media is obviously biased for Donald Trump. We're good, they're bad. Perhaps, to nobody's surprise, a YouGov poll is showing CNN has slumped to its lowest point in history in terms of public trust. CNN has never been as mistrusted as it is right now, and they deserve it, and they did it to themselves, and I have no sympathy for them. Now, here's a story that you are probably not going to be hearing on the corporate media. The other day we were talking about how in 2008, candidate John McCain approached Russia's ambassador, the one who died under mysterious circumstances a couple of weeks back, and solicited a campaign donation from Russia, which is illegal. And Russia, knowing what the U.S. laws are, and maybe not liking McCain, turned him down. Well, now there's a new article out. This is from Russia Insider, quoting The Guardian as their source. Well, I'll save this until after the station identification. You're going to love this one. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. The phone lines, we're going to reopen the phone lines, 800-313-9443. So we're talking about John McCain, who's rapidly becoming one of the most hated politicians in America, and raises the possibility, how is it he keeps getting reelected? And I would remind everybody that there is no rule that says election rigging is confined to the presidential race. So a while ago it came on out that McCain had solicited campaign donations from Russia back in 2008, which is illegal. And according to this Guardian article, Judicial Watch is now looking into the possibility that at one of John McCain's campaign fundraising events, where the tickets were $1,000 to $2,000, according to the Washington Post, the actual costs of throwing the shindig, renting the venue, providing the food, all the other costs, were actually picked up by the Rothschilds. And that may have been an illegal fundraising incident as well. Judicial Watch is now looking into that. Good for Judicial Watch. Now, the presidential election in France is starting to get into real dirty territory here. Members of the European Parliament have voted to revoke Marine Le Pen's parliamentary immunity to allow French prosecutors to take legal action against her for tweeting gruesome images of the killings by Islamic State militants. France apparently has a law saying you're not allowed to post pictures of graphic killing, but Marine Le Pen was immune, being a member of the European Parliament. Now, this is why in this country we have what's called the ex post facto provision of the Constitution. Basically what they're doing is Marine Le Pen did something that she was allowed to do, and the European Parliament is saying we're retroactively making what you did illegal so the French authorities can throw you in jail. That's how far they're willing to go to try and derail her election. Anybody can look at that on the face and see this is ridiculous. This is obvious political dirty tricks to do that. And by the way, in a way, this gets back to the phone call we had in the first hour, where they're talking about everybody wants to get rid of Thomas Jefferson because he owned slaves and he did this with Sally Heming and he did that and so forth and so on. Well, when Thomas Jefferson was alive, everything he did was legal, approved of socially. That was the behavioral norm for them. And I get very tired of people living here and now who judge people in history by today's standards, because it reveals an arrogant assumption that we have evolved the perfect society and therefore now have a right to view anybody who lived differently than we do as somehow inferior. And I think anybody looking around our country today is going to realize we do not have a perfect society at all. We have serious wealth imbalance. We have bad factionalism, violence in the streets, drugs all over the place. We've got a long way to go before we hold ourselves up as an example to judge people in history by. And the same thing here. When Marine Le Pen posted those images, she was within her legal rights to do so. And now they're changing the rules to retroactively try and get rid of her. I think that's going to see her poll numbers go up. Now, over in Syria, the Syrian army has retaken the Palmyra citadel from ISIS. That was a real trick if you look at how well fortified that building is. They now have the high ground over the city. They've apparently reached the palatial grounds to the southwest of the city, and they're on the verge of retaking Palmyra back from ISIS. This is getting very close to being over. Now, the U.S. is accusing Russia of bombing U.S.-backed rebels. Russia is denying that it happened. If the U.S. wasn't sending rebels into other people's countries, it wouldn't have happened in the first place, if in fact it did happen. For all we know, it was one of the U.S. pilots. They've got such terrible eyesight. They always claim to be bombing ISIS, but they're always hitting hospitals and water treatment plants and petroleum facilities. I mean, they might have just hit the wrong people on the ground. Friendly fire is a reality of war. Now let's talk about Afghanistan here. Afghanistan may be providing an oil and gas pipeline for the oil consortium, pipeline right-of-way, and certainly it's providing huge resources of opium to American drug lords. But America has now been at war in Afghanistan for 16 years. This makes Afghanistan the longest foreign war in our history. And that's not something that we're going to feel very, very good about. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We forgot to do that in the last hour because we were dealing with all these audio issues here. But Afghanistan, people are looking at that and saying there is no end in sight. There's no end game. There's no plan to shut down. It's like the U.S. intends to garrison Afghanistan until the oil and opium run out. And for those of you considering a career in the military, is that what you want to do? Stand guard over opium poppies? Because that's what a lot of those coalition forces are doing. We've got the pictures. Now, over in Ukraine, things are going from bad to worse over there. Ukrainian, well, they're described as Ukrainian fascists. I think they're just Ukrainians who are sick and tired of all the war. And they're blocking the transport of goods from Ukraine to Novorossiya and vice versa. And it's led to clashes between the two groups. And somebody actually got a video of one of the Ukrainians attacking a rival group with a chainsaw. I mean, that's how desperate it is. And Poroshenko's problems are ramping up because now the Nikolaev region is talking about breaking away from Ukraine. According to the governor of that region, they're saying it's already 65% separatist. 65% of the people in this region do not want to be part of Ukraine anymore. They're described as latent separatists, so they may be breaking off. Now, with the election of Donald Trump, U.S. support for Poroshenko has stumbled. And Poroshenko, even before the election, was seen as less and less of an asset in the region and more of a liability because he was not able to carry out his assigned task for which he was put into Kiev, which was to kick Russia out of Crimea and drag all of Ukraine into the European Union. And it stumbled badly, and Ukraine has just been pounded, especially its industrial base. And the U.S. is now realizing that they've bitten off more Ukraine than they can chew. Apparently the United States is informing South Korea and Japan that North Korea may be reinstated to the list of state sponsors of terrorism. It was removed back in 2008. When they were still talking about possible reunification. Now they're going to go back on the list. This is significant because it basically imposes additional restrictions on products, services that can be sold in and out of North Korea. Now, as that caller mentioned before, we're seeing more and more of these instances of tombstones being knocked over in these Jewish cemeteries all across the country, and it's getting huge media coverage. Oh, they're desecrating our tombs. They're desecrating our graves here. And, by the way, it actually is not that hard to tilt a tombstone back up and put it back where it's supposed to go. But even Donald Trump is suggesting that all of this stuff and the phony bomb threats into the Jewish centers may be false flags that may be staged to make people look bad. So Trump is beginning to see through all of that nonsense, and that's a really good thing. Now then, let's talk about our much beloved and abused F-35 aircraft, which has officially been declared ready for combat by the Air Force, even though the final software package is not expected to be completed for another 2, 3, possibly 5 years. The onboard cannon still doesn't work. In fact, the software for the onboard cannon hasn't been delivered. Still at least a year away. It's been discovered when the cannon fires, it vibrates excessively. It's cracking structural members near it. And there's overheating, premature wear of components. We know about the insulation in the wing tanks breaking off and destroying the engines. And the virtual reality helmet still does not work. $400,000 each for those helmets. And apparently the aircraft is proving to be extraordinarily unstable while crossing the sound barrier. And there are no plans for a fix. It's described as objectionable or unacceptable flying qualities while crossing the sound barrier. And here's the latest one. The laser targeting system on the F-35 can only hit stationary or slow-moving objects. That's all it's good for. It can't be used to engage and target rapidly moving objects. So the only thing it's really going to be good for are all those shiny new pickup trucks that somebody bought for ISIS, because they don't go all that fast. Now, the latest dose of booga booga that we are getting from the war hawks is warning about ISIS is using drones. They're using drones, and now the warning is up. They're launching swarms of drones. They're going to have swarms of drones coming over us, and I have no idea what they think the drones are going to do. But that's their latest booga booga. They're running out of new ideas. You know, ISIS has a Death Star. ISIS has resurrected Godzilla. Who knows what's going to go on. Now, getting on back to my comment about how I do not agree with Donald Trump's pumping an additional $54 billion into the Defense Department. There's a story that came out of dailycaller.com on how the Department of Defense commissioned and then buried a report that revealed billions of dollars in bureaucratic and contractor waste and showed a clear path to how the Defense Department could save $125 billion by 2020. This was actually reported in the Washington Post. Now, we know the Pentagon has managed to misplace $6 trillion. That's over and above the $6 trillion that they spent on all these wars over in the Middle East. I'd certainly like to know where that money went. I'm sure Donald Trump would like to know where that money went, because then he doesn't have to give the Pentagon another $54 billion of taxpayer funds. But there is a lot of waste. I actually got to see it firsthand many years ago, both when I was working with NASA and had to interact with the Air Force, and then later on when I was working for Robert Abel & Associates, and we were contracted by Martin Marietta to produce a simulator for battle management for the Star Wars program. And it is a shock when you first encounter how much money they have and how willingly they just throw it around. You and I, if money is water, we are all living with eyedroppers. Most businesses have a drinking fountain, and military contractors have fire hoses. That begins to give you an idea of the scale. And it reminds me very much of something George Bernard Shaw wrote in the third chapter of Man and Superman, which stands by itself as a standalone work called Don Juan in Hell. And it's a quote from Satan, who I got to play in the stage presentation, that there's nothing in man's industry but his greed and his sloth. His heart is in his weapons. And when you look at the degree of military spending in this country, that certainly is very true here as well. We're going to take a phone call now from Andrea in Oklahoma. Aloha, Andrea. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Every time President Trump mentions our wonderful, good friends, Israel, I'm like dying out here in Oklahoma. It's like, what would be more effective? Trying to send an email or write him a letter and enlighten him on what really happened in 9/11, that the dancing Jews on top of the van, the two trucks that, well, one was full of bombs, that Larry Silverstein bought the building just months
He leased it.
before. Oh, well, everything I pulled up, he spent over $3.22 billion on it, and then turned around and put a big insurance policy thing on it for 55 billion. But I hear he made a profit of 7. So
oh yeah, he made out really well on this. Well, let me answer your question here. Emails are not read by human beings. They are scanned for keywords, which are added to a database about what people are concerned about, and you'll get a form reply. The best ways to actually get your message read by a human being, not necessarily Donald Trump, is either to fax it or send a paper letter to the White House itself. And if you're going to send a paper letter, attach your supporting documentation, URLs, and everything, so that they can just sit there and go through it. I've already done that once on the issue of election fraud. I have yet to receive a reply. But those are pretty much the best ways that you can do that. As far as Trump and Israel, I do not have much hope that he is going to change his mind about them in the immediate future. First of all, his father was apparently friends with Benjamin Netanyahu. He got a lot of support from American supporters of Israel during this campaign, and he's feeling that obligation. But I think once he starts interacting directly with the government of Israel, he's going to realize that much of his image of Israel is what he got from TV corporate media, and now that he knows corporate media is lying, I think he's ready for that apotheosis where he's going to say, boy, has the corporate media been spinning us a fiction about Israel and Palestine. But I don't expect that to happen for a few months.
Okay, because that there is the Symington Amendment, and there is the Glenn Act, and we're still, hopefully, we will stop that flow of $50 billion without fail every year when this country desperately needs it, and I guess we're getting ready to see another shutdown because of the lack of money. It's just that they won't draw their borders. They don't play nice with anybody that lives close to them. And they have over, well, it's debatable whether they have 200 or 400 nuclear bombs. Good God.
Even 10 is enough to cause a lot of mischief here. There's a great deal of concern that Israel actually has a clandestine nuclear weapon already inside the United States of America. And that goes back to a survey that was being done by NEST, the Nuclear Emergency Search Team. And because there are lots of natural and explainable benign radiation sources over cities, NEST was creating what are called baseline maps, where this is what the normal city has in terms of radioactive sources. And when they were making the baseline map for New York, they found radiation was coming out of Israel's consulate in New York. And Israel will not explain it, and Israel will not allow any kind of an inspection. And the reason it's of concern is because Israel's first generation of nuclear weapons was built with fissionable materials smuggled out of the United States. It was called the Numex scandal. And it would have been very trivial for Israel to leave some of that material behind, because once you have the fissionable uranium, making the actual bomb is child's play. And so we've got people out there saying, expect a false flag from Israel to launch the war against Iran. And a mushroom cloud would really do it. All right, we've got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Moving on with the news here. As you know, there have been a lot of very strange deaths of Russian diplomats, as well as the aircraft crash that killed the Russian Army choir, and they were really good singers. Claire was just inconsolable that so many really good singers died, because we can't find good singers around here. And the deaths have been described as heart attacks or brief illness. In many cases, there's evidence to the contrary. And it does seem like there is either a real streak of bad luck in the Russian diplomatic corps, or there's some wet work going on. And so we dug up this YouTube video about a CIA whistleblower who blew the lid off what is called the heart attack gun developed by the CIA. And what was really interesting is when this device was first made public before Congress, it was claimed to be a Russian invention. And then it later came on out this was something the CIA developed, and they decided to use it to demonize Russia. See, Russia's running around killing all of our people, and was actually going the other way. And obviously this is worth another look, given all these strange deaths that are going on around there. All right, let's talk about the economic news just a little bit. Snapchat is going on out for their initial public offering, the IPO, and Snapchat apparently is valued at $22 billion, even though they're not actually generating any profits at the moment. And people are scratching their heads and saying, what's going on with this? Who's going to profit from this? And why would anybody buy into a company's IPO when the company is not showing profitability? Speaking of profitability, another story coming out of Investment Watch blog, analysts are warning to possibly stay away from stock in Apple because double-digit losses are on the way there. Now, Apple is one of those companies that fell into this business model of planned obsolescence, where every 5 years you will buy the next computer, next laptop. Every 2 years you will buy the next upgraded iPhone. And in this economy, people don't do that. They're hanging on to what they've got. This is, I think, an iPhone 5, and I have absolutely no desire to replace it while it's still working. And I'm constantly getting sales pitches from my cell phone provider. You know, it's time for you to get your iPhone 7. I don't want an iPhone 7. I'm very happy with my iPhone 5. Now, I will grant you, we are getting ready to get rid of that Android thing that Claire has and get her back onto an iPhone. But that's out of necessity. The iWatch was not a big success. The planned iRing, I don't think, is even going to get off the ground. And we all like gadgets and whiz-bang, and we like to have our little toys. But the reality is most people who bought into smartphones, they play with them for a while, they play with all the apps, and all of a sudden they realize they're just back to using the phone for the basics. Calling people, texting people, sending email, web browsing, and then that's it. They don't really use most of the apps that are on there. And that kills the enthusiasm for getting a larger, more powerful version to run apps you're not using. Now, Donald Trump is dropping hints that he thinks it might be a good idea to bring back the gold standard, and even more interestingly, introduce it as the standard for a global currency. That the new global currency ought to be based on gold. That, of course, is going to be opposed potentially violently by the private central bankers, who want the entire world enslaved to their virtual make-believe fairy tale currency created out of thin air and loaned to you at interest. But Trump's comments have basically sparked interest in where gold is going. Story out of Goldcore is saying that gold currently is undervalued, according to leading money managers. And they're starting to talk about how gold all along has been manipulated to keep it down, to keep people's money in the savings accounts in the stock market. Even Alan Greenspan is sounding caution. More about that when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're currently under a little bit of rain and thunderstorms, and the power just dipped here, so if we vanish again, you'll understand exactly what happened. We had somebody call in. They didn't want to go on the air, but they were suggesting that the high value of Snapchat for its IPO may be related to their going into facial recognition, because that's the next big thing, facial recognition. And it strikes me as being a technology that is never going to be able to be perfected, because people, simply as they age, their faces are changing. We know it's very easy to fool facial recognition systems with just a little bit of makeup. Certainly at night, there are those caps you can buy that have the LEDs on the brim, and they're infrared, so people don't know there's anything going on. But to those surveillance cameras at night, there's a big white blob where your face is supposed to be. But it's the next big thing, and they're going to bubble it on up there. All righty. Well, we're talking about gold. We're talking about gold prices being kept on down. Alan Greenspan, before he became head of the Federal Reserve, was a gold bug. He was always talking and writing about the value of a gold-based currency as being best for the nation and its people. Then, of course, he became chairman of the Fed, and immediately he was into this ink and paper loaned interest model, because that was his job. Now that he's no longer chairman of the Federal Reserve, he's back to being a gold bug. And so over at Goldcore, there's an article where Greenspan is saying gold is now the ultimate insurance policy in the face of grave concerns about the long-term survivability of the euro. And Greenspan is out there saying the Eurozone isn't working. And Greenspan is saying he views gold as the primary global currency, which is very much the same thing Donald Trump is now saying. And Greenspan is saying when we start to get into hyperinflation, the price of gold is going to go right through the roof, and investing in gold now is fiscal insurance. And it makes a lot of sense. Now, there's another story that came out of Investment Watch blog. New uncovered information why central banks were forced to rig the gold market. And they have a history of all the steps that have been done, going all the way back to Richard Nixon's ending of gold convertibility to keep the price of gold way, way down. And when we asked the question about where did the gold in Fort Knox go, where did the gold that was being stored in the New York Federal Reserve and J.P. Morgan's gold vaults, where did they go? This article is saying it was being dumped onto the market. It was being minted up as coins and sold to the American people, and literally flooding the market to suppress gold prices. Then they started running out of gold, and they started using those paper contracts to do the same thing. But they're saying the long-term plan all along has been, at some point, to outlaw private ownership of investment metals to the American people and bring it all back in and start the scam all over again. Now, relative to that issue about is there really gold in Fort Knox and the New York Federal Reserve, and remember we did this, one of the episodes we did on America's Book of Secrets for History Channel a while back was the gold conspiracy. And it's rather alarming how much of what we suggested was going on in that episode has since been documented as actually happening. So apparently there was a Freedom of Information Act request made to the U.S. Mint to release the audit reports of the gold in Fort Knox from 1993 through 2008. However, the documents that were provided are incomplete and show that the audit process was not executed proficiently, meaning it was slapdash and reckless. In fact, the Mint was so embarrassed by this obvious non-audit document, they actually refunded the Freedom of Information Act cost, which was $3,000. And I'm sure in the future the U.S. Mint will say, well, we had a Freedom of Information Act and we audited the gold and it's all there, trust us. But it doesn't sound to me like the document they produced is going to convince anybody about that. Now, as you know, there are other stores of wealth outside the banking system besides silver and gold. There are collectible items, which can be matters of fashion, like the Legends of Nashcar plate collection that Larry the Cable Guy is always talking about. One of the stores of wealth that the ultra-rich love are works of art. And some of them can command huge prices, and they get auctioned back and forth, and the prices go up, just like land flipping. But it looks like the art bubble is about to burst, because Russian billionaire Dmitry Ribovlev paid $85 million for a landscape by Paul Gauguin back in 2008. On Tuesday, he auctioned it off, and he took a 74% loss. That's going to shake up the art world quite a bit. Meanwhile, Bitcoin prices have hit a record high as ETF approval, causing massive gains. So the virtual currencies are beginning to take off, and I'm talking with one of those startup companies called Cloak, and we're going to be having one of their people on the show in the near future talking about virtual currencies and how they work, because unless you spend a lot of time looking at it, it can be a mystery to those of us who think of money as something that you've got in your wallet and that you take on out and you spend at the store. We're going to take some phone calls here. David in Utah, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Are you there?
I am here.
Hey. You should get your item Friday. I just wanted to talk briefly about immigration.
Okay.
I agree with what Mr. Trump is doing. I think he needs to go a little further than merely deporting the criminals. I think he needs to deport all the illegals.
I agree.
But at this early stage in his presidency, as you have said before, I think it's a little too early to judge on a lot of things.
Well, he certainly said all the right things last night. Like I said, I agreed with about 85-90% of it. And the reaction around the world has been extremely positive. It was a very dramatic change that we saw last night. We saw Donald Trump the president as opposed to Donald Trump the campaigner. And the difference was quite striking. And again, to give credit where credit is due, whoever wrote his speech, it was an absolute masterpiece. I'm sure future political speechwriters are going to be studying it, in college. But Trump delivered it very well, and he stayed on point, on topic. He went off script only one time when he was joking about the people from Harley Davidson wanting him to take a ride on the motorcycle. That was definitely spontaneous ad lib. But he stayed on the focus. He stayed on the script, and it was rather interesting to see on certain comments he made where he was definitely gesturing and addressing the Democratic side about cooperation and coming together. So he was sending a lot of very subtle messages with that speech.
Did you happen to notice that an entire half of the audience was just sitting there without applauding, without expression, without standing up?
Yeah, well, those were the Democrats. But again, toward the end of the speech, and especially when Trump started, bringing out these success stories, the widow of the SEAL who'd been killed and everything, some of the Democrats began to stand up and applaud as well. And it actually began to look to me like Trump was winning over some of those Democrats. And, of course, as soon as the speech was over, they had all apparently agreed to just skedaddle on out of there. But they behaved very shamefully. They behaved very, very shamefully, and I can't imagine any ordinary American looking at that speech and looking at the behavior of the Democrats and not just thinking the lesser of them for it.
Agreed. They were a disgrace.
They were. Okay?
That's all I had. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks. We're going to let you go and switch to John in Alberta. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I was just wondering if you could explain something to me. It's regarding the U.S. debt clock.
Yes.
You know that big dashboard with all the flickering numbers?
Mm-hmm.
In the bottom right-hand corner, it's got dollar to silver ratio in 1913 at $2.64.
Yes.
And it has dollar to silver ratio now, and it's like $850 per ounce. And it's the same with gold. Like in 13, it was $28.
I don't think silver's that high. I don't think silver's that high right now.
No, like what are they referring to?
Well, I'd have to go back and look at the actual debt clock to see what the iconography is saying, but there's absolutely no question that our monetary supply has been inflated, and that $1 today is worth just a few pennies of what $1 was worth when the Federal Reserve was created.
I wonder if that's just it. But I did a little bit of math, and that would be like inflation, right? Like, or the devaluation of the dollar.
Yes.
And it's different on both metals. So
well, there's also a fluctuation in the demand and supply of the metals from supply from the mines and demand. Silver has a lot of demand in industry, so does gold. Demand for silver went down as we moved away from chemical-based photography and got into digital imaging systems, because there was a lot of silver that was being used up in the photographic process. In fact, most large photo labs actually had silver recovery systems set up to leach the silver back out of the film emulsions and recycle it.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I think I contributed an awful lot of silver in that process. However, it just puzzles me, like, why are we seeing dollar to gold ratio at 7,753 and dollar to silver ratio now at 850?
I'm gonna have to
see how they come up with that.
I'm gonna have to research that, because I honestly do not know. Those numbers do not seem to equate to the current prices in dollars, U.S. dollars for silver to gold. So I'll take a look at that and see if I can figure out what those numbers mean, okay?
Thank you.
All right, we're going to switch over to Richard in Cleveland, Ohio. Aloha, Richard. What's on your mind today?
Monetary reform. I think the same kind of topic that you were just talking about. I wonder if you're aware about the situation in Russia. I know I've heard you mention it a couple times. It looks like they're going to be completely debt-free by the end of this year. They just have a couple of countries they have to pay off for. I guess it was old debt from when the Soviet Union kind of collapsed.
Yeah, that's what they're paying off, is the debt left over from the Soviet Union. Russia itself still has current debt that it's dealing with.
Well, I mean, I think are you familiar with Bill Still?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw a video that he put out recently that said they were going to be debt-free. Now, I kind of wonder if that isn't the reason why they're demonizing Putin right now.
Oh, there's no question about it. There's no question about it. Russia's central bank is privately owned, and it was being privately managed, and Putin took over, he imposed government control on Russia's private central bank in order to manage Russia's public currency as a public utility. And that was literally the day that Putin went from being a trusted friend and partner of the United States to the top of the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list.
So let me ask you a question. Now, I'm not really sure, but do you think that basically they are issuing debt-free currency, like that they are actually creating their own money and spending it into circulation, or...
I think they're still using the private central bank fiat system because they need to have that to interact with the rest of the world. But I think Putin basically is keeping the interest and the debt under control. Because when you have the bankers running the private central banks, all decisions are made in terms of what will bring more money out of the population and put it in the bankers' pockets. And Putin is running the Russian central bank to keep as much of the Russians' money in their pockets as possible. And that's why he is so hated right now.
Well, I'm just wondering, because, I mean, how can you be debt-free if you have to borrow? You know what I mean? So how can you get to that point if you're not actually just creating it?
Well, it's a subset of the debt. And, yes, in many cases you can inflate the debt away by printing up more money, but it simply represents a new debt that has to be dealt with down the road. And if you really think about it, all of these debt-based private central banks are pyramid schemes or Ponzi schemes. And they're able to last as long as they do because they're basically their victims are the entire populations of nations. Here in the United States, 330 million Americans, and that's why the Federal Reserve Ponzi scheme has been able to survive for a little over 100 years, although it looks like it's about to take a major stumble.
I have one more thing to ask you about. Are you familiar with the Chicago plan It was the University of Chicago Economics Department. In the 1930s, they came up with a monetary reform plan in response to the Great Depression, because they were kind of asking themselves, well, how can we prevent something like this from happening again? And there's a guy in Chicago named Steven Zarlenga. He wrote a book called The Lost Science of Money, and is basically championing the Chicago plan. Now, Dennis Kucinich, a couple of years ago, introduced a bill called the NEED Act, and I want all your listeners and everybody to look into this. It's called the NEED Act, and he introduced this bill to Congress. It was a monetary reform bill, and basically went into committee, never came out of committee, and then they redistricted Kucinich, and he lost his seat.
Yes.
But if you've never looked into it, look into the Chicago plan, and it's wonderful, and it would save America. It would save the world. Really.
Well, I'll take a look at it. The problem is that the economic plan that works best for the nation and the people is not the plan the private central bankers want. Private central banks do not exist to serve the nation and the people. Private central banks exist to serve themselves. That's why the Rothschilds are so amazingly wealthy. They've been playing this scam on planet Earth for 300 years. Okay?
Yeah, but it looks like one of the major powers is doing something like that, like Putin over there. And if we got a crazy little uprising here, maybe we can do it here, and maybe we can get.
I'd like to see it happen here. It's time for this private central bank scam to go away. They've made enough money off the slave labor of the human race. It's time for it to come to an end. Anyway, Richard, we're going to let you go here because we're about to take a commercial break. When we come back from the commercial break, we're going to do one more phone call. Then we're going to close the phone lines again because I got a lot of news to go through in hour number 3. So we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take one more phone call. Then we're going to close the phone lines. Kyle in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Well, first of all, Trump has continued to impress me. That speech last night was unbelievable. I think a lot of these Democrats thought he was going to come out, be his typical rambunctious self, and he just put them in their place. I love the fact that he's got them reeling on their heels. He has made them so impotent, it's not even close. They have literally nothing to bring them. You can tell that by that pathetic Democratic response last night. They had a guy who, A, wasn't in elected office and lost to a Republican, give a response that was just completely, nonsensical.
I agree. He was responding to a speech that never took place, and that's why I was suggesting in hour number 1 that maybe Trump has identified one of the leakers in the White House staff, and he gave them a completely bogus draft of the speech. And so the Democrats were preparing to respond to a completely different speech. I think he may have snookered them. That's how out of sync that response was.
Well, if you look at his speech, which was all about inclusivity, unity, bringing people together, hope, good things for the future, and then you look at the Democratic response, these people, they look like they were out for blood. It was not a good look for them.
Well, like I said, I love the close-up of Nancy Pelosi's face, but I think the nadir for the Democrats was when Trump is out there announcing a special group to help victims of crimes committed by illegal immigrants, and the Democrats are all booing. How can you boo wanting to help the victims of crimes? And I think they don't realize how that looks. Okay. They don't realize how that looks.
Giving the thumbs down when you see them in the stadium, or when they were giving the thumbs down when he was talking about not leaving people uncovered by insurance when they repeal or replace Obamacare.
Yeah.
They're showing people in the stands giving them the thumbs down. It's like, this is not good optic, guys.
I remember seeing that. Well, they probably didn't realize the camera was going to be on them. But the reality is that probably everybody, in that Democratic side, they all own stock in the health insurance industries. And that is an issue that I really think needs to be dealt with. It's one thing to say the president has to have a blind trust and we shouldn't let his wealth influence them, but all these members of Congress are allowed to have all their wealth, control of their wealth, invested in areas that they know are going to gain from the decisions they're making. And obviously when Obamacare was being sold, they were all buying into the health insurance companies, and now Trump has basically pulled the rug out from under those health insurance companies, and they're all losing money, and that's all they're thinking about. Is Trump is taking away our money that we worked hard at our corruption to get that money. How dare he take it away? All right, listen.
And if you look at the end of it...
Kyle, we got to let you go. I'm sorry. Got to let you go. We're going to take a station break. Going to close the phone lines and do some news when we get back. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 3. The phone lines are closed right now because I have got a lot of news to catch up on, so we're going to rush through this stuff here in hour number 3. Up in New York, the Teamsters Road Carriers Local 707 Pension Fund has gone bankrupt. It's a dubious distinction of first pension to officially run out of money. And obviously a host of angry former truck drivers are very upset that all of a sudden their pension checks just aren't going to show up anymore. Now, the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, which is an insurance carrier that insures pension funds, has been officially forced to step in and take over the payments to retirees of 707, except the payments are cut. They're not getting the full amount of their pensions. They're getting a reduced amount. Now, why are all these pensions in trouble? Well, because way back in 2008, when Wall Street was cooking up this mortgage-backed security fraud, Wall Street's pet rating agencies declared these mortgage-backed bundles as AAA rated securities, and that made it legal for pension funds to invest in them. Pension funds, retirement funds, anything that's in that sector of the market, they are constrained by law to only invest in the safest possible investments because their clientele are people who are in the sunset years of their lives. They don't have the luxury of having youth and energy and the ability to go on out and rebuild their lives after a catastrophe. And so Wall Street's pet rating agency said these are all AAA. The pension funds bought into them. The mortgage-backed security fraud imploded, and the pensions were defunded. Congress had a little bit of hearings, but nothing was done. And as is always the case in a fascist economic dictatorship, ordinary people, in this case the retired truck drivers, are forced to pay the costs of the crimes of those in high places. The poor are always made to pay for all. Now, the auto industry is in the United States is still out there manufacturing. They're talking about bringing plants here and providing jobs in their agreements with Donald Trump. There's a missing component to that equation. Customers who are going to be buying those cars. Now, one aspect, of course, is the rather dismal safety record of these vehicles, the embarrassments over the airbags and so forth. The other is that, again, Americans just don't have the money to go buy a new car. I'd love to buy a new car, or at least a newer car. I'm driving a 17-year-old Honda, which, to Honda's credit, is holding up really well. But it's not going to last forever. Now, U.S. auto dealers, for the first time in 37 years, are having to rent overflow lots because they're being sent more and more stock from the auto factories, and they can't sell it. And there are some amazing deals out there. If you look at the commercials for the new cars, I mean, if you actually had money, it's a wonderful time to be buying a new car. But nobody has the money. So it's one thing to say we're going to bring back the jobs, but along with that, you have to have the people who are going to buy what those jobs are producing. It's going to be a very long, difficult process. It's not going to happen overnight. Anybody who thinks Donald Trump is going to wave a magic wand and repair our economy instantly, you're living in a dream world. Go hang out with the liberal Democrat crybabies who still think Hillary won the election. Office Depot has announced a drop in their sales, and they're going to be closing more stores this year. This is quite understandable. Office Depot, and Staples for that matter, were catering to home office companies, businesses run out of garages and homes, entrepreneurial activity, small businesses. Unfortunately, small businesses have been crushed in this economy, and that is complicating factor, because prior to the collapse of the mortgage-backed security fraud in 2008, small businesses accounted for 60% of new job creation. And these small businesses were the bread and butter of these office supply stores. Large corporations just order the stuff in by the truckload. They don't need to go to a retail brick-and-mortar store. I certainly hope they don't close the one we have down here at the bottom of the hill, because then I have no idea where I'm going to be buying paper and ink for the printer and everything. Target is teetering on the edge of collapse. We were talking yesterday about how they've seen a major drop in customer flow at their store, exceeding the reduction in customers at retail outlets in general, because they went along with this liberal nonsense about the transgender bathrooms, and people just don't want to go on in there. Because when you go into a large store, you know that sooner or later you're going to hit the restroom. And if you're afraid to go into the restroom because somebody may be in there with ill intent, you're not going to go to that store. You're going to go to a store where you know that the guys are going to go to the guys' bathroom and the girls are going to go to the bathrooms, and all will be well. Now, that being said, there are places in the world where bathrooms are totally co-ed. And that works out as well, I think. This idea about having a men's room and a ladies' room and then allowing men to use the ladies' room because they claim they're a girl inside, that was almost the worst possible approach to the problem. And it did lead to some very unpleasant incidents where men would just walk into the ladies' room and expose themselves or even assault, young girls. Now, the way a co-ed bathroom works is very simple. It's a very large area. There's sinks and everything, and there are individual stalls for all the commodes. And obviously, only one person goes into a stall, so there's no problem there. And it actually works out very well, because if you're having a discussion with a member of the opposite sex and you want to hit the restrooms, you can go on in and you keep on talking. You can even talk through the wall of the commodes if you want, and then you go and you're washing your hands side by side and you keep the discussion going. I went through that when I was working in Italy. It worked for me. Anyway, Target's in trouble. But maybe some of these people who are losing their jobs in retail can think about a change in career, because we are now receiving word that the U.S. Border Patrol is hiring in Arizona, South Texas, West Texas, and New Mexico for permanent full-time positions. So if you've ever wanted to wear a uniform and a badge and do something good for the country, go on out and join the Border Patrol. Let's see. Apparently, applicants cannot be over 40 years old. Darn. Must be a U.S. citizen. You have to pass a polygraph, as well as the educational requirements and a background check, because they've had a big problem with U.S. Border Patrol agents selling out to drug smugglers and so forth. Venezuela is down to their last $10 billion, of which $7.2 billion is already pledged in outstanding debt payments. Things are so bad in Venezuela, Venezuelans are literally separating food from waste. They're literally down to eating from the garbage bins, and apparently all the pets have pretty much vanished as they've been eaten as well. Next it'll be each other. Now, as you know, during last night's speech, Donald Trump went on the warpath against Obamacare, saying it's either going to be completely repealed or it's going to be completely redesigned. And, of course, the liberal establishment is out there saying that, they're against Obamacare light. They want to keep it exactly the way they are. And again, I think it would be a valid exercise to look at the financial investment portfolios of all these people out there still insisting Obamacare be left alone, and see how many of them are invested in the health insurance companies that created the Not Really Affordable Care Act, to see what their financial motivations may be. Trump, again, did the right thing in pointing out they were not going to cut people off. People with pre-existing would be guaranteed coverage, and there'd be a smooth transition so people could go from one system to the other. Nobody's going to be abandoned. Now, the other day we were talking about how in the early days of Obamacare, Barack Obama ran out of funds for the subsidies that were supposed to be paid for the poorest signers on Obamacare and the exchanges, and Congress refused to fund it. And Obama dipped into the money from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And this has now resulted in 2 lawsuits now going through the federal courts. Because, in effect, Obama robbed private investors who had invested in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to fund Obamacare. Those private investors were expecting a share of the profits. That's why they invested in there. And Obama just grabbed that money and he spent it on Obamacare. And he may have committed a crime. Just like when President Bill Clinton looted the Social Security cash surplus for his magic federal budget surplus, even though that cash surplus in Social Security was put there in anticipation of the surge of retirements when the baby boomers came of age, which is why Social Security is in serious, serious trouble now. Now, on Friday, last week, Robert Davi challenged his fellow actors, the elites of the Hollywood elite, to break down the security barriers at the Oscars, the tickets, and all the rules, and invite illegal immigrants and refugees to sit amongst them at the awards and attend the swanky after parties alongside them. Not a single one of those Hollywood elite did that. They're always willing to talk about the refugees and the illegal immigrants, but not at their own personal inconvenience, of course, here. Jean-Claude Juncker is out there vowing that the European Union is going to press ahead with a complete federalization of the European Union, despite Brexit, and despite the fact that nobody in the European Union wants a federalized EU. In fact, ex-Tory Minister Sir Malcolm is out there saying Brussels is already doing too much. They're way beyond their original authority, and he's absolutely true, because when the European Union was first created, all it was supposed to be was a free trade, free travel zone. That was it. And over the years, Brussels has just evolved and mutated and metastasized into this central governing tyranny, accomplishing in only a few years what it took 200 years for Washington, D.C. to do to the United States. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Brendan in Wisconsin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Very good to talk to you again. I heard some from time to time I hear callers calling from Wisconsin, and I wish there was a way that we could get unofficial Rivero's Rangers to meet up in Wisconsin or Minnesotan people or whatnot. That's topic number one. Topic number two, I only say that because there are a lot of them in Wisconsin per capita. Number two, did you hear anything about, and I apologize if I missed this and you covered it earlier, that Obamacare was being offset monetarily by funds from Freddie and Fannie.
we just did that just before I took your call.
Oh shoot, I'm sorry. But I do appreciate the RBN call-in number. And then also, if there was a way to donate to you guys, that would be great. And then the fourth point would be, where do we think that there are a bunch of neocons that are in the cabinet, and I'm trying to parse that, and I have arguments with with family members, and I will fully admit that there are some cabinet members that I do not care for, and I question their motives. And there are ones that I do not question their motives. So, like EPA, going back on some of those really strict water regulations for private citizens, yes, great idea. But
well, can we go back to the
we see
cabinet? Can we go back to the cabinet there, because there's been an interesting development on that. Donald Trump is looking, and he even said this at the beginning. He was going to find what he felt were the best qualified people for the jobs he needed to be filled, and he didn't care what their allegiances were. And he drew a lot of flack for it, much as the same way General Patton was criticized for hiring ex-Nazis into government positions in the post-war Germany. And he basically came out and said, look, if you can find people who can do the job, I'll use them, but right now these are the people who know how to do the job as long as they follow orders. And I think Trump has appointed these people to his cabinet, and they may be neocons, but Trump is taking the position they're there to follow his lead, not the other way around. And he may have already sent a message to that effect, because there's been a lot of confusion over Michael Flynn being asked to resign, and it was supposed to be over an issue of trust and so forth and so on. It has come on out that Michael Flynn, as soon as he got inside the Trump White House, started lobbying for an immediate unprovoked attack on Iran. And Trump said no, and Flynn would not shut up on that, and that is the real reason Flynn got shown the door. And that's going to send a message to everybody else on the cabinet. You know, you follow the boss or you're going to be fired.
Okay, Michael. Do you have decent sources for that information?
Yeah, they were.
I'd like to know that.
I think the story was up on the main web page a day ago. You can scroll down to page 2, and it's starting to surface in a bunch of different areas. That was the real issue that was going on. That Michael Flynn got in there, thought he was in charge of that branch of policy, and he got his pink slip. And that, of course, is going to cool down the other ambitions on the cabinet. Now, getting on back to the comment you made before about donations, I'm pretty sure there's a button on the RBN page where you can send a donation. There certainly is a big donate button on my web page where you can send a donation. And we're going to let you go because we have a bunch of callers, and I still got a bunch of news. We're going to switch over to Andy in Texas. Aloha, Andy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Andy, are you there? There you are.
Yeah, aloha, Michael. I'm not going to talk about white vans and homeless disappearing today. But I do want to talk about Venezuela. You know, you've reported on it several times, and I've heard a lot of news about it over the alternative news. You don't hear much on the corporate news anymore. But I'm really wondering, why aren't we helping these people? And I mean, as a human race, why aren't we helping these people?
Well, certainly the United States government is not interested in helping those people. The United States government worked very hard to put Venezuela in this situation. Venezuela is one of those nations whose government thought the people's money ought to be spent on the people, and even worse, were selling their oil for currencies other than the U.S. dollar. And the United States government has been waging covert war against Venezuela all the way back to Hugo Chavez. They even got him out of power for about a week with a coup, and there was an immediate counter-coup. And so that's the reason the corporate media is not going to report on Venezuela, because it's another U.S.-created mess, and it's another U.S. failure. And the U.S. government is not going to step in to help the Venezuelan people, because what they're working for is the complete collapse of the Venezuelan government, so that they can go on in with a new replacement government that is suitable to American corporate interests.
Well, but they're doing this at the detriment of the people who have nothing to do with the government.
They don't care.
I mean,
the people at the top of these governments don't care what happens to ordinary people. They never have. That's why they are in these positions of power, because they can do what they do and feel absolutely no guilt or remorse about it at all.
But I do. I care about these people. I care about every human life, every animal life, every plant life on this planet.
Well, when you run for Congress, you can count on my vote.
Got you.
Okay.
Thank you, bud.
All right, we're going to switch over here to Alex in Florida. Alex, I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I hope that you're right about Michael Flynn being let go because of Iran. I was kind of disappointed with Trump last night talking about Iranian aggressions and stuff like that. I don't believe it to be true, but anyway.
Well, that was Trump pandering to the Israel lobby.
Okay, I hope that's right.
And that was in the 15% of the speech I did not agree with. Anyway, listen, we got to take a break for commercials. Alex, I'm going to put you on hold. Do not hang up. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to finish up now with Alex in Florida. Aloha. Welcome. Where did we leave off?
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Where did we leave
Well,
off?
I just wanted to make something clear to people so that they understand. Obamacare, if you make $35,000 a year and you're 60, it's twice as expensive as Medicare would be. And I'm talking about Medicare where you have the supplement that pays 20%. When you go to the doctor, it's $0. The hospital, $0. Medicare would be around $220 a month for a person that's 60 that makes $35 a month, but it pays everything. Where with Obamacare, it would be $500, plus you would pay full co-pays when you go to the doctor or the hospital until you meet a deductible of usually around $6,000.
Yeah, it's ugly. I mean,
that needs to be said.
It does need to be said. When I went on to my Obamacare compliant policy, my premiums doubled and the deductible went so high, it was just impossible to take advantage of the policy. Now, I certainly hate getting OLDER, but this is the year where I sign up for Medicare, and so I'm looking forward to that drop in the rates and getting that supplemental and everything.
And I advise you to stick with straight Medicare because it is the public option, and we all need to take advantage of that public option when we have a chance. It is the public option to stay on the government form of Medicare. You can always trade that in for a corporate plan, and what are called Advantage plans, but I recommend you staying on original Medicare and getting a prescription drug plan. Finally, I wanted to say that I believe that a lot of the Democratic Party, especially Clinton and Podesta and them, are the deep state. I think they are facets of the deep state or appendages of the deep state.
You know, I really think the phrase deep state is intentionally misleading because it's implying that we can't see it. But it's really right there in front of us. It is that entrenched political establishment of politicians who just hang on to their office year after year after year, like McCain. It's like all these attempts to convince us world events are being dominated by these remote, far-off things like the Bilderbergers and the grotto. The cause of all of our pain and suffering is right down there, in the middle of our cities in those Federal Reserve banks. It's right there in front of us. We just have to open our eyes and see them for how they truly are, as opposed to what we're told to believe they are.
Yeah, I believe that there's probably people in the deep state that are above, like the Clintons and the Podestas and the Bushes, but those are pretty high-ranking officials of the deep state. They're puppets of the deep state.
Well, I think we can pretty much assume at this point that the deep state it certainly includes the Central Intelligence Agency because the Bushes are neck deep tangled up with the CIA, the Clintons are tangled up with the CIA, and we have these rogue intelligence agencies who think they really should be running the government. That was certainly the case with the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover, and even when they were starting the Central Intelligence Agency. Even the people who were saying we needed it were saying there's a danger there that they're going to think they should be running the country. And there we are. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go. We've only got a half hour left of the show today. We're going to close the phone lines for the rest of the program here. I've got a lot of news, and I'm probably not going to get through all of it here. Getting on back to the European Union, the latest word now is that Poland is thinking about their exit. Getting out of the European Union. And right now, they're basically trying to push back against this deeper integration with Brussels, this federalization. And they're basically talking of once Article 50 is triggered in Great Britain, they're going to start looking at leaving the EU as well. The European Union is a failed experiment. The euro is a doomed currency. But these New World Order globalists, they're so close to their dream of a one-world government and a one-world private central bank, they can't let go. They're desperate. They're desperate fanatics, and that's what makes them dangerous. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to the show here. Right now it is estimated there are 20 million African migrants heading for Europe. And the European Parliament president warns that this huge number are going to arrive in the next few years unless action is taken. And Antonio Tajani said Europe needs to do more to help asylum seekers in order to quell migration. And they're talking about setting up refugee centers in other countries who are probably not going to want to have them there any more than the people of Europe want them there. I have this really crazy, wild idea on how to deal with this whole refugee situation. How about if we stop all these wars that made these people refugees in the first place? Because I am sick and tired of everybody writing in that we're heartless for not allowing the refugees to come to our country. I'll tell you what's heartless: bombing these refugees' home countries to make them refugees in the first place. That's the part that was really heartless. Why aren't we criticizing that? Why aren't we doing something about that? Now, Katie Hopkins is a journalist. She's out of the Daily Mail, and she's over in Sweden. And she went over to Sweden to actually find out what's going on the streets there from all of this immigration refugee nonsense. She starts out saying the reason she went to Sweden is of all the mail she was getting from people of Sweden saying just how horrible things have become. How parents are worried about their daughters. How it's a very unsafe place, how it's rapidly becoming the rape capital of the world, and the rapists are literally live streaming the rapes. That's the new in thing. I'm going to go commit a rape and televise it. I'm going to be a rising star in independent media. Now, Tim Pool is a journalist who was sent to Sweden to investigate as well. And he said he honestly thought he was going to be able to walk around the neighborhood without any problems. Wrong. He's got a police escort now. In fact, the police are telling him he really would be well advised to get out of Sweden right now because Sweden is this wonderfully peaceful place and there's no problem from the refugees whatsoever. Tim Pool did a video interview of a local Muslim in Sweden saying that 20 to 30% of the Muslims support ISIS. And apparently, according to this article in Sputnik News, jihadis who are coming back to Sweden are in fact forming networks, Islamist extremist networks, to find new recruits to send down to the war zones. All right. Now, back at the CPAC meeting, Wayne LaPierre, who's the executive vice president of the National Rifle Association, was out. He did a presentation where he was showing clips of Trump supporters being attacked, seriously hurt, and Wayne LaPierre is now warning that he is expecting Soros-funded protesters are going to start committing acts of terror in the United States. And certainly that is in keeping with a plan to create a color revolution in the United States, because if you go back and you look at these other manufactured overthrows, coups d'etats in other countries, along the way from destabilization and protest, there are going to be acts of terror. We saw that in Kiev. We saw that in Iran and back in 2009. It is part of the ongoing pattern. Now, here in the United States of America, up in Minnesota, Governor Mark Dayton wants to enable illegal immigrants to get Minnesota driver's licenses. So, let's take another look at Title 8, U.S. Code, Section 1324, which says, knowing or in reckless disregard of the fact that an alien has come to, entered, or remains in the United States in violation of law, transports or moves or attempts to transport or move such alien within the United States by means of transportation or otherwise in furtherance of such violence of law, a person who violates that law basically is subject to a fine or imprisoned for not more than 5 years or both. Now, I would say that issuing driver's licenses to illegals is clearly intended to assist in their transportation across the state. Therefore, under the letter of the law, Mark Dayton is liable for a 5-year prison sentence for every single driver's license issued. Trump really doesn't need to build a wall with Mexico. All he needs to do is start enforcing the existing laws to shut down the incentives for illegals to come here. And just point it out. You're not supposed to hire an illegal immigrant. We have 90 million legal American citizens willing and able to work, and Trump did include that in his speech last night. The focus has to be getting them the jobs, not the illegal immigrants and the refugees. Now, China, interestingly enough, has maintained a one-child policy for all married couples because China has had problems with overpopulation in the past. Apparently, they've now gone too far, and they want to turn it around. And they've actually got one of the lowest birth rates in the world right now. And China is now going to start offering incentives to its citizens to get out there and screw for China, following the model set by Denmark, which is already working. By the way, a little bit of film trivia. You've probably all seen the movie 50 Shades of Grey, if you're old enough. Apparently, there was a baby boom 9 months after that film hit the theaters. One of the stars was being interviewed, and he said, yeah, we got back the word that 9 months after the movie came on out, there was a significant pop in the birth rate. Now then, our Department of Justice, Attorney General Sessions, is now openly disputing Barack Obama's claim that racism among the Chicago police was responsible for what appeared to be a rise in crime, that the police were just picking on people in Chicago and that there really wasn't an increase in crime up there. And Sessions is saying that's nonsense. Now, speaking of Obama, the Obamas are going to make over $60 million from a book deal. Penguin Random House has issued a press release. They won the bidding war to get the memoirs of Barack and Michelle Obama. And I cannot imagine what motivated them to do that, because basically we're going to have the former president and first lady trying to rewrite their history the way they want to be remembered and then expect us to pay for the propaganda. And I am predicting that this book is going to be a sales disaster. It'll be proclaimed a bestseller, because we now know the bestseller list is actually made up. It's not actually based on real sales numbers. But it's going to be like Hillary Clinton's It Takes a Village. It was proclaimed a bestseller. They made an audiobook out of it. Hillary Clinton won a Grammy for that. 6 months later, It Takes a Village was in the bookstore's manager's closeout bin for 50 cents. I know, I saw one. And I still didn't buy it, even at that price. Story coming out of Russia today, over in Indiana. Apparently the police there used $400,000 in asset forfeiture funds to boost their own pay and benefits, which the law does not allow. This civil forfeiture has to be brought under control because it's incentivizing the police to become criminals. Under those civil forfeiture laws, the police are now stealing more from the American people than the robbers, muggers, and burglars put together. Up in Canada, they've just declared jiu-jitsu illegal. Apparently they have laws up there regarding combat sports. And there was apparently a Brazilian jiu-jitsu championship in Montreal that was about to start when they were notified by the Canadian authorities that the police are going to come over and arrest you, because jiu-jitsu is now considered illegal because it's a combat sport up in Canada. Apparently, Amazon's outage yesterday was so severe, Amazon couldn't get into their own dashboard to post a notice that their web service was down. And, of course, they affected our show yesterday. They affected access to my server yesterday. Now, there's a story out here that is focusing on Google Chrome, why you must update your browser right now. And apparently people are receiving these notifications that they have to log into their Gmail account. And it turns out it's a phishing scam to get email addresses and password information. It's not confined to Google Chrome. Claire got this on her Android phone. And we kept scratching our heads and trying to figure out what the heck it was all about, because Claire does not actually have a Gmail account. And how they managed to tie it to her cell phone number is a mystery. But obviously these hackers are very, very sophisticated. And the NSA is sitting on its thumbs doing absolutely nothing about it. Apparently there's another scam involving WhatsApp, where apparently email is offering a fake 250-pound Marks & Spencer gift voucher in return for completing a survey. And it's another way of obtaining private information from the unwary. Speaking of private information, this Internet of Things teddy bear leaked 2 million parent and kids message recordings. They got hacked, the recordings were downloaded, then the servers were locked up and held for ransom. And of course, the plush toys themselves can very easily be hacked directly and used to spy on children. And apparently it can actually be done where if you have a portable device with Bluetooth, you can actually log in to the toy and view its web page and see what it's got recorded and stored and ready for upload. I would never buy one of those for a kid. That's ridiculous. That's complete ridiculous. Now, earlier we were talking about Snapchat's IPO being supposedly worth $22 billion, and maybe it was being priced that way because of its potential for facial recognition. Somebody sent me an interesting story about how facial recognition fails completely. And it's something apparently nobody thought of. Down in Georgia, their Department of Motor Vehicles uses facial recognition when you apply for your driver's license. And they hit a major snag because 2 identical twin girls applied for driving permits. The first one got her driving permit. The second one was refused because she was already in the system. Oopsie. Facial recognition system decided they were the same exact person. Even though it was a different name on the application, oh, it's got to be the same person. I wonder if these facial recognition systems are aware that we have lookalikes out there in the world. We like to think we're all unique among the billions and billions of people on planet Earth. But as a giggle, I've put my own face into Google's image search, and it'll come back with a lot of pictures that are legitimately of me. And they come back with a lot of people who look very much like me, but they are not. But they look enough like me to have fooled the facial recognition, at least as Google has implemented it. Another story coming on out, this from NBC in Washington. Search has found another 100 federal government employees caught viewing copious amounts of pornography while on the job. And apparently the cases include workers who were spending 6 hours a day surfing pornography and literally keeping tens of thousands of adult pictures on their office desktops. Those desktops are paid for by you, the taxpayer. Their salaries are paid for by you, the taxpayer. If Donald Trump wants to start cutting the federal budget, let's start cutting all these people who are not actually doing any job. Whether they're watching porn or kiddie videos or recipes or quilting corners or whatever, let's start getting back to a meritocracy. If you work, you get paid. If you're not doing the work, you're fired. That should be the hallmark of the Trump presidency, the you're fired presidency. Over in Italy, specifically Sicily, Mount Etna has erupted. It's a huge eruption. Already they're issuing warnings for the ash cloud as it spreads across Europe to divert air traffic, so there's going to be a lot of craziness in air scheduling over Europe for the next few days, if not weeks. As I mentioned earlier in the show, we have a blizzard warning, an official U.S. government-issued blizzard warning on the top of the Big Island here in Hawaii. And I posted an image to one of the webcams at the observatory. It's pretty intense up there. And it's actually very rare to get blizzards at the very top of those mountains because the top of the mountains are at 14,000 feet. And usually they're above the weather clouds. That's why you put observatories up there. But they were certainly getting hit with the snow. Same thing on Haleakala, the observatories up there. Now then, Subway continues to be under fire over this finding that their oven-roasted chicken patty is actually half soy protein. And the company's saying they're concerned. They're obviously trying to figure out how they're going to salvage their reputation. And I already have an idea for the Subway advertising people. Your new slogan could be, look at the bright side, you're 50% vegetarian. That might work. Or they could get the child molester back. I don't know whatever's going to go on. Here's a bizarre story. PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, deployed these lettuce ladies down to Cuba. These are girls who are dressed in bikinis made out of lettuce leaves with the signs, don't eat meat, eat vegetables. And they went all the way down to Cuba, and I'm sure the Cubans are somewhat impressed, although ladies tend to go around very scantily dressed down there, and it's no big deal. The problem is Cubans, because of their economy, they have very little access to beef, chicken, and pork. They're already pretty much vegetarian. Did these PETA girls just decide they wanted to take a vacation in Cuba and glued some lettuce onto their naughty bits and headed on down for a laugh? We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. We are now getting word that Bernie Sanders, who's been very, very critical of the Democratic Party of late, is considering forming his own third party. I think that would be a very good thing, and he's going to be forming that third party primarily out of people who are disaffected with the current Democratic Party. Because a lot of rank-and-file Democrats are still furious at the way the Democratic National Committee threw the nomination to Hillary, and they're tired of being associated with this very childish tantrum behavior we're seeing from the liberal Democrats. So they're probably going to be flocking over to him in large numbers. And I think that would be a really good thing. Now, as you know, there is a fistfight going on over marijuana legalization. And on one side, you have people talking about the medicinal benefits of marijuana, the fact that it is far less harmful than tobacco or alcohol, the fact that it is an historic intoxicant going back thousands of years. And on the other side, you have those who wish to preserve the profits of the tobacco and alcohol companies and the CIA's drug smuggling. And they're fighting back and forth, where you have the states that are trying to legalize or decriminalize recreational marijuana use. And now you have Attorney General Sessions out there saying, we will enforce the federal laws. Well, that may be changing, because Representatives Tom Garrett and Tulsi Gabbard, go Tulsi, have introduced the Ending Marijuana Prohibition Act of 2017. And if passed, it will remove marijuana from the federal list of controlled substances, would end its prohibition on the federal level, allowing the individual states to decide what marijuana policies they want to follow. The measure is identical to a similar measure filed in 2015 by Senator Bernie Sanders. So go Bernie and go Tulsi and go Tom. And I'm sure that Tulsi is uninfluenced by the fact that we reportedly grow some of the best marijuana in the world here in the Hawaiian Islands. So I've heard. There's rumors around. I don't actually know that. Actually, I do. A funny story in this last minute before the show ends. We used to have some problem neighbors over here, and they finally got arrested and shut down. And it was only then when the police were carrying the pots off the front porch that I realized they'd been growing marijuana right there on the front porch. And I didn't even realize it. Otherwise, I would have been over there with a weed whacker and a mason jar. All right, let's see. We're coming up here on the end of the show. Apparently, Flint water supply is now linked to Legionnaire's outbreak. And that was something else Trump made in his speech last night, that we have to get back to a nation whose infrastructure provides safe drinking water to all of Americans. And it is so important that we do that. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got a bunch of stuff I got to work on this afternoon. We'll be back here tomorrow, Thursday, on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Claire will be here on Friday. At least that's the current plan. So we'll talk to you tomorrow. Aloha, America.